it's gonna be on YouTube.
All right.
But she had, but I was very respectful of her. I was.
Did you ever learn to write like she taught everybody how to write? I don't do it.
So before we get started and call the meeting to order, I'd like to ask, first, silence the cell phones. And second, I want to ask Heather to say the opening prayer and Dr. Mark to do our pledge.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight to ask you to be with us and watch over us. Help us to make wise decisions. Be with us and watch over us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right.
Let's stand, please. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Okay, one announcement before we get started. I just now posted on our city Facebook page. We have had a road collapse down East Locust going down where Bloink Chiropractic's at. It's a huge hole. Matter of fact, Mike Wood barely got his car out of it. It would probably, the way Greg said, it probably would take the road that we've got down there. It would fall in. This just came about in the last few minutes. So what they're doing, they're down there now with barricades. They're going to actually bring our heavy equipment down and make sure that it's blocked off, keep people out of it. And so the streets that are going to be closed will be South 3rd Street and East Locust, South 1st Street and East Maple, East Locust and South Court going up behind Sonic, going up toward the jail. That way they'll close that part off. And then East Locust and Old Gallatin Road, that part there going down to 773 right there from there. We want to keep them out of that area. I mean, this is pretty serious. So in the morning, they'll be getting a track hoe and getting that taken care of. Apparently what happened was there was concrete there that actually collapsed, and that's what caused the big collapse. There's been some erosion there, but not to this extent, and apparently for whatever, maybe more rain, whatever. So that's on Facebook now. I don't know if it'll get on the radio tonight or not, but it'll be on there in the morning for sure. So, and I may go down later after the meeting and do a Facebook Live. So, anyway, okay. So, I'll call the meeting to order of the Scottsville City Council special called meeting Monday, June 16th at 7:30. Franklin?
Yes.
Beverly?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Heather?
Here.
Shane?
Here.
Peanut's not here. Okay. Did everyone have a chance to look at the agenda for tonight's meeting? If so, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I so move that we approve this special call meeting agenda tonight.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Okay, all right. If everyone had a chance to look at the June 9th, 2025 regular session meeting minutes, any corrections or additions? If not, I entertain a motion to approve those minutes, June 9th, 2025 regular session.
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, all right. Okay, so the only thing we've really got on the agenda for tonight is a first reading of ordinance number 893-25, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance. Previous ordinances amended by this ordinance are 665-98, 680-00, 700-02, 743-07, 784-12, 838-21, 872-23, and 877-23. On a personal note, I really hate that Murray State got non-heated today. Oh, so that come out loud? Sorry about that. I hated that. Y'all see any of it? Anyway, little business there, little place. Yeah, Murray State got no hitter by Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
They did.
Wherever you call it, I don't know what.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, okay, I'm sorry. Kind of got lost there for a minute. So Brittany Fisher is here they just had a planning and zoning meeting earlier and reviewed the ordinance and the updates, and I think she'll bring us up to speed. Basically, and you might explain, and I was kind of interested about what you said, that you're incorporating all this into the large ordinance. It's been piecemeal or something, but this kind of takes it all under one umbrella. You might kind of explain just that general process?
So with the zoning ordinance, the planning commission typically makes recommendations to the city council, and then those are read with a first and second reading and get codified into your all's city ordinances or municipal ordinances. In discussion with Hallie as the city attorney, some of the documents weren't necessarily always either codified within the portions for the zoning ordinance, or sometimes staff members previously with the planning commission didn't take them to you all for readings. So that's why there are so many different meetings that are referenced then also on the current ordinance number. I don't know, well, one extra from, that's an older one, was added in there because it wasn't ever brought to you all for codification and first and second reading. And then there were some things on the sign ordinance that went through in 2023 where it was copied and pasted from another jurisdiction, and it included zoning districts that we don't even have in the community. So we were trying to get those kind of things corrected. Is
You wanna explain
that
that?
what you were talking about?
Well, yeah, exactly, and it just, I mean, explain what codified means. And it's something that Lauren actually does, I think.
Lauren, you want to do it?
You wanna explain just a little bit? I mean, that's just something for, information.
So whenever you all as the city council pass city ordinances, they do go into our files as ordinances, but for them to be legally published, they have to be codified. And so each year I submit an annual, document that have all of the ordinances that you all have passed throughout the year. I take all of those, put those together, and send those to American Legal Publishing, who then goes in and double checks that nothing is unconstitutional or nothing is against laws as they currently stand. They go through and publish those and send us those supplements, where each year I actually have you all pass a separate ordinance to say that you will accept the supplement for all of the ordinances that you did prior. And then they update the website for us as well so that the public can see those updated ordinances.
That's like when you Google, like, you sent an ordinance and it was legal, whatever, you just go in, it gives you the official ordinance, how it should be presented. Because sometimes maybe at the local level, if it hadn't been codified yet, it's not in, I guess, in the format or whatever. Okay, all right, enough been said. So, floor is yours.
Okay. Do you want me to read the whereas portion as well, correct? Or-
I don't think you
No.
Okay,
that's
okay.
fine.
Summary, the first
Okay. The first document, the summary portion, I'll just note that the planning commission has held multiple hearings and has made the following recommendations for the zoning ordinance as presented to you all, with highlights in yellow for the things that are being changed. Those hearing dates were May 22nd of 2023, May 19th of 2025, and June 16th of 2025. And the reason why we had two is because we found out the manufactured homes bill had passed at the state level mid-meeting on the May. We didn't know that prior to that time. So that's what hearings on the planning commission side. I guess I will start going through here and talking about the different changes highlighted. Of course, the first page is just going to be the current ordinance number that you all are looking at. And then within the table of contents on page IV, it's just something to make it where it lines up with the other zoning classifications. So it's just literally changing a title of an article within it. The next changes will be found on page 8. It's just changes in definitions, making things more streamlined. In the past, different areas would say your front yard setback has to be equivalent to half of the width of the right-of-way of the street on which the building fronts, and then it said, in no case shall this distance be less than 25 feet. We did this so it would line up with our subdivision regulations that we were also amending to make all of our front yard setbacks just a straight 25 feet. If a right-of-way is wider, the developer can choose to have a larger setback, and that is just going to be where your front of your building is. So we were trying to get those in alignment. And that also wound up striking just because of the way we changed our verbiage, so that it applies to any front yard setback. So before there were corner lot provisions in there. And it required, shockingly, the same side yard or front yard setback on that one that's functioning as the side. So we just did that to make it easier. And that was done with a phrase in what became section C. Then E, it talks about not needing a variance. A variance is a separate process that goes to a different board or should go to a different board. And this makes it where you can just do averaging of the front yard setback for the adjoining lots to maintain the character of the neighborhood. And that was just getting that where it was easier, once again, to do for people when they're developing. On page 11, the manufactured home permits, I put in or their designated agency or their designee. And that is because currently the county judge executive's office is doing the manufactured home permits for both city and county properties. On page 15, we had the addition of group family residential district. It was added as a district, but was not put in the establishment portion of the districts. Additionally, we have renumbered those to reflect the order in which they occur in the ordinance and are discussed in the ordinance, as well as the addition of the HDO, which is Historic District Overlay. We'll talk more about that in length later. On page 20, building, it used to be just building line, and then we've added setback line, and then it talks about the requirements of that, and then also the wall and foundation, and doesn't include eaves and overhangs of less than 2 feet, so that keeps you from having a largely cantilevered eave, just to make it we don't want it to get too close to that, but then typically the eaves and overhangs aren't included in that setback area when you're calculating that. And then it also talks about the provision that does not include fences, landscaping, or play equipment. That's just a common question that we get, and it's easier to put it in the definition than answer the question a million times. On page 24, in the manufactured home initial definition, we added the and qualified manufactured home. We then followed up on page 20. Oh, that's going to be a lot later because of the alphabet, sorry. This is where your all's notes differ from mine on my planning commission meeting. On page 26, you'll notice non-buildable lot was an added definition. It's done to create lots, the ability for lots to be used only for utility purposes, and they don't have to meet all of the requirements that are typically done on a lot. And that's just because we have situations that exist. A lot of the times they're out in the county, but it could happen in the city as well, where they don't meet. In the county, it's the 0.7 acres, or in the city, if they did not have sanitary sewer, it might not be the full 0.7 acres, and they would be able to have that reduced lot size, but it wouldn't be able to have a structure on it. Sometimes they do need to do that just for transfer purposes. Or in some cases, when they're on the county water system, it winds up being for water service. But it also, if you all were to need something for a utility purpose, you would be able to utilize that non-buildable lot. It specifically mentions that it's allowable for utilities as well as drainage purposes and environmental hazard areas. On page 27, qualified manufactured home is added. That definition includes the language from KRS 100.348 as well as KRS 227.570. And that is what was changed in this last session. Then we have the addition of sexually explicit entertainment activities or sexually explicit entertainment establishment as defined by the City of Scottsville Ordinance 685-01, and then talks loosely about what those highlighted establishments are within your all's adult business ordinance. Page 37, we added the section that says this includes qualified manufactured homes. And then the way that our zoning ordinance is, it's kind of circularly referencing itself. So if you'll notice down below it, multifamily is what's known as a more intense use. And it then says any use permitted in the single-family district and multifamily dwelling. So that makes sure that you still have the qualified manufactured homes and meets the requirements of the new KRS. Page 40 goes to some special accessory uses. Once again, that's that front yard setback thing, making it where it's just a standard 25 feet and not the differentiation. Page 40, again, down in the prohibited uses section, it's just trying to make that language align with things that you all had been working through with the code enforcement officer and making it line up with the other sections of the zoning ordinance. Additionally, on item 5, it says that manufactured home class A and or class B not meeting the definition of qualified manufactured home as well as mobile homes are prohibited. So that makes it where it's still just those qualified manufactured homes which are manufactured within 5 years of being placed there. The other items highlighted on page 41, some of them are clarification due to questions, some of them are correction of terminology to meet with the standards within planning as well as engineering. The changes in the square footage for both multifamily on page 41 as well as group family on page 42 are in order to meet the same minimum lot requirements of those lots that are on private site sewer or a septic system. So that's what those are. Once again, manufactured home residential on page 44. It's the addition of the qualified manufactured home. Page 45, it's going to be correcting the way that things were listed to make it in alignment with other sections that were already there. And then D down at the bottom in section 5 is going to be, once again, that language change for the engineering and planning terminology. And then page 46, just that 25-foot front yard thing we keep talking about. 47, once again, in the manufactured home park district MH2, similarly, adding the and qualified manufactured homes, as well as the prohibited uses and structures, making those align with the other sections of the ordinance. On page 52, the highlights are with any uses permitted in the residential districts with the exception of manufactured homes. With that KRS legislation, it specified that qualified manufactured homes had to be allowed in residential districts. The downtown business district is a business district. It is not a residential district, so you can keep that exception or add that exception in here and not be in violation. Page 54, that's just another change for planning and engineering terminology. Page 56, sexually explicit entertainment activities or sexually explicit entertainment establishments as defined in the City of Scottsville Ordinance 685-01. That's something you all have had on the books, but for some reason, the Planning Commission never put it in as a permitted use in any zone. So a lot of jurisdictions, what they'll do is they'll have it in their industrial zones, so that way it's not necessarily on the main thoroughfare. And it makes it where it keeps the aesthetic of the community. It is a use, and you cannot zone it out, so you have to have somewhere for those businesses to go. So we've included it in the I-1 and I-2. All of your all's other restrictions from that ordinance are still in effect, like distances from churches, child cares, parks, that sort of thing. All those things are still in effect. This is just literally saying where it can occur within our zones. Subsequently, it doesn't have the highlight on I-2, but once again, it's a circularly referencing document, so it says any uses permitted in the I-1 are also permitted then in the I-2, so it is allowed there. Page 59 is just something to correct how the placement of where loading and unloading and off-street parking is covered. Then I didn't highlight this section because the entire section is new. So starting on page 60 is going to be the historic district overlay. And it's just pages 60 and 61. And an overlay district is something where it still carries the underlying zoning. So in this instance, there are some businesses that are B1 in those areas that are shown in the map in pink, blue, and yellow. There are some that are B2, and there are maybe a couple that are single family, if I'm not mistaken. So it just goes through and creates that historic district overlay to give the ability of the Historic Preservation Commission to have the limitations of use that they had intended in their own meetings to be carried over then into the zoning ordinance, so that we, as the planning commission staff, can tell people when they come in, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to have this business, or in the future we may use it as an incentivization technique. I know there are several districts that will incentivize, like microbreweries can only be in their historic district overlay area, and that's just something that they have used to spur that growth in the downtown and get businesses where people are coming in and out. That's not in this ordinance as an incentivization, but it's just something that we could do in the future. I will not bore you with me reading 2 entire pages to you, so I'll highlight the prohibited uses. These were, once again, things that the Historic Preservation Commission had voted on previously. Any use prohibited in the downtown business district shall be prohibited in the HDO. And then additionally, smoke shop, dispensary, cigar lounge, tattoo parlor, casino, gambling hall, palm reading, psychic services, blood bank and or transfusion center, and pawn shop are prohibited uses. Tobacco stores as a principal use. CBD, THC, marijuana, cannabis, vape, hookah, recreational drugs, kratom, and similar sales are all prohibited. Alcohol package stores and malt beverage stores as a principal use. Camping, panhandling, and soliciting. Group homes and homeless shelters. Sexually explicit entertainment activities or sexually explicit entertainment establishment as defined in the City of Scottsville Ordinance 685-01. The other thing of note is going to be your limited uses. The areas shown in pink are actually the ones that are within the National Historic Register, if I'm not mistaken. And those buildings are specifically not allowed or are limited to residential, being only on those above street level for apartments and or dwelling units. In other words, you can't have a street level apartment. And that's something that's not uncommon in the downtowns. They want those downstairs units to be for items that are for businesses, retail uses, restaurants, that sort of thing that bring people in. Additionally, it talks about design review with the Scottsville Historic Preservation Commission in section 6. Then when you get into the signs and billboards section of the zoning ordinance, there are going to be several different things that are highlighted, and they're mostly to make it align with the section of our zoning ordinance. And then also in the permit section on page 63, those are to make it align with the current contract with the City of Scottsville and I can't remember Jim's business name, but Jim Griffin, the contracted building inspector. So over 7 feet in height above grade requires a permit. That was something that is specified. And then he also requires 72 hours minimum notice for inspections. Once again, as talked about, it's just correcting changes or making changes to correct terminology that was used or zoning designations that were incorrect in the initial approval on page 65 and again on page 66, 67. On 68, we get to something that we did add in. It specified that only one menu board was allowed. I know McDonald's has multiple menu boards, so I added in the terminology or the language per drive-through lane, walk-up window, or drive-up curbside, and that's just because McDonald's has 2 lanes. And then I guess technically you could count every stall at Sonic as a menu board. Then when you turn over to 69, it's going to be once again that correction of either subsections of the zoning ordinance or the districts and the way that they are termed in our ordinance. Same thing over on 70, correction of those types of issues. Shopping center malls are not in the industrial zones, so we didn't cover that on there. 71, more of the same, just correcting that it's within this article. This is typically covered in the main broader section of the zoning ordinance. I went ahead and kept it in as a secondary fail-safe, I guess, for the substitution severability clauses. And then also section 15, it's just specifically signed definitions in that. So they were already things you all had voted on, but we just had to make sure we specified it with signed definitions because there's another definitions section within the ordinance. We get a long time where we don't have to do anything, I think. And in the future, if you all approve this reading and as well as the second reading, and it's codified properly, according to Hallie, we don't have to go through giving you the whole document again for a meeting. So I do apologize that there were issues in the past, but we're working hard to get things done the first time for you all now. So on page 97, the zoning ordinance has narrower lot widths because it's in the city, and that allows for higher densities because you have the public sewer system. So there is an exception written in there. It should have been in there all along. The way it was written previously, it said the most restrictive case, which would mean that then all lots in the city had to comply with the lot widths that are in the county, which are typically larger. So that was just a correction of that. Like in the B2 or B1 district, I think you can go down to 20-foot wide lots, just because of that commercial nature and the nature of the downtown historic district. Additionally, there was the title on Article 18 of validity of zoning ordinance and effective date. However, there was no discussion of effective date, so we just added that in. And then if you all choose to specify a different effective date, you could do so. Then when you get to pages 101 and 102, Article 21 is the tiny home and accessory building ordinance. It should just say building section. I mean, it works. But that is actually something that Jerry Biddle and the previous Planning Commission staff brought up together at Planning Commission meetings, but never brought to you all. So that is why it is in here in its entirety. And I have talked a lot.
Cover a lot of ground. So this would be considered the master document. For future reference, you won't have to go through all of it.
Correct.
I guess I have a question. The format of this is based on state regulations. Am I right to assume that?
It's based, yeah, everything that we have to do has to some basis in the state KRS statutes. KRS 100 governs planning commissions and planning and zoning actions. But then some portions, like the manufactured home portions, we have to add in as KRS, or as the legislature adds those sections into KRS. So we think everything is up to par. It's just getting everything in there now for you all.
Well, I think the manufactured home additional, you may want to explain a little bit of what happened. I mean, it really was passed, in April by the legislator sometime?
Yes.
And never was actually brought to attention. I know Peanut said that the Realtor Association was not even aware of that provision, which is usually they would be on top of that. So what they've done is, somebody else needs to explain.
I
what
barely
that
skimmed
allows
over it.
to do, what it allows. it's a little bit more lenient.
Yeah, so the legislature was trying to address affordable housing issues that we have currently within the state. And they made the decision, to go forward with allowing qualified manufactured homes, and requiring those to be allowed in every jurisdiction within the state, in their residential zones. So that's not something we can say no to now. But with the qualified portion, it makes it specifically, that's that 5-year rule. So if on June 30th, I want to put in a manufactured home that was has a manufactured date and sticker from its manufacturer of May 1st of 2020, I would not be able to put that manufactured home in a residential area per the way the zoning ordinance has been written to include that. But if it was did I say June 30th or June 1st? I don't remember. If it was July 1st of 2020, you would be able to put that one in. And it's just to make sure that those are homes in good repair. It's like they wanted to make sure they had that affordable option with manufactured housing in all jurisdictions, but they wanted to make sure that it was something that was newer and should be in good repair.
Well, and also I
Essentially.
think it addresses the issue and I think we addressed this already, but like for instance, if you have a trailer or something, like we've discussed this, Heather, or on the Old East Main, stuff like that, that they would be able to put back a manufactured home, a trailer or whatever, that meets those specifications. Because really, honestly, up until recently, you weren't able to do that, which was really not fair. Because, certain demographics can only afford certain things. And, a lot of like Clayton and a lot of these manufactured home manufacturers, have terms that sometimes may be easier to get a home. And as long as it meets those, the criteria, because in the past you wouldn't be able to do that. So if you took the trailer out, you couldn't put it back, which was kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's not fair. And because that's what it was set up for, and that's where the area, and that's what they wanted. Well, this allows that, in certain areas. But now, like, for instance, if a subdivision has their own HOA and
Yes.
they've got bylaws against manufactured homes, then that cuts them out. So that addresses that. I mean, there are restrictions at the local level through the home associations.
Through private individuals, the governmental
Yes.
agencies cannot restrict them, but
Right.
private developers can restrict their lots. They can still say no manufactured homes whatsoever if they choose to.
Well, the development going on out 231, I'm assuming my Commerce definitely will have a no manufactured home provision in that.
Okay.
But it has to be through the developer now. We can't do that. That right? It
Yes,
has to be
that's
the
correct.
developer has to do that themselves. We're not allowed to do that anymore. It's set by the state now, which is actually more fair and more applicable, and probably will give some people an opportunity to get a better place to live that they should have been able to do before.
This may not be something that we can answer, but I just wondered, does these new specifications for the tiny homes pretty much apply to what tiny homes are already built here in Scottsville right now? We do have some already.
I did not review those for that. They were developed prior to me coming here and had been voted on by the commission at that time. So I did not review that. I trust that the previous staff and Mr. Biddle have reviewed that to make sure that they were in compliance.
But I believe we passed
But-
those as a city council too, though. We adopted those.
I don't think
So
so.
many square
I
feet.
talked to Jerry one time about the tiny homes, and I think he went by the state.
Okay,
I don't think we've adopted.
He went by what the state regulated.
okay. Well, a lot of times, I mean, it's, to adopt the state makes it more equitable, I guess.
The language that's included is what Jerry had given me that the planning commission had approved previously when he and the previous planning commission staff had brought it to them. a lot of it is from within the building code.
Well, see,
Just
they have to
looking
be-
at the
They have to be
terminologies.
inspected. Our bill, Jim Griffin has to inspect those tiny homes. They have to meet the same criteria as any type of home size. I think it's 500 or 300, 500 square feet is the minimum.
Says
400.
400.
Says
400,
400.
yeah.
All right, so, but I'm saying that if you're building a 400 square foot house or a 2,500 square foot house, building inspector's gonna hold them to the same, same provisions and criteria. Which, you know, some people, that gives another option for affordable housing, I guess.
All right, but I was wondering about this, but the last sentence kind of straightened it out for me. A building is not considered a dwelling unless it provides room for cooking, sleeping, and sanitation, so it's not necessarily
Well, that's
all
why.
under these unless it has those.
And
Well, that's why code enforcement has the ability to evict people from sheds and buildings because they don't meet living standards.
Okay.
You know, if it doesn't have running water, it don't have a toilet, whatever. I mean, we have that. We still have that. We've got a few, I know at least one, there's somebody living, whatever, and it doesn't meet the dwelling. And that's, you know, it's not sanitary or anything else, though. That's the reason he can evict those people. Because it's just like you said. I mean, you know, somebody's gonna live somewhere, they gotta have all the basics, it says.
Right.
Any other questions?
I got one or two. Brittany, on page 26, the non-buildable lot
yes,
section there, there's no unit attached to 20. I'm assuming that's 20 feet. But it just
yes,
says
I'm
20.
sorry. Yeah, it should
Okay.
be 20 feet.
Just a typo there
Yes, sir.
that 20 feet didn't get in there. Another question I had, what's the difference by definition between multifamily and group family? I'm trying to find that in there where it was used, but I just wrote it down when we went across that, so I just didn't know there wasn't anything in the definitions of multifamily or group family,
That's what I was
so
trying to look back for.
to designate the difference, so I just didn't know I mean, I know what a multifamily is, but I didn't know what group family is.
Do you know what page number that is?
No, I
Do you-
couldn't
okay.
find it when I was trying to fold pages down and make notes, and I didn't.
I get it.
And I've been back through it again, I can't find it now, but I know it was mentioned as group family, and I
Yeah.
didn't know what that was.
Group family, I was trying to look at the portion of the chapter. I know it talks about sleeping quarters per building
Okay.
shall be 4 units.
It's,
I've got
on-
a definite, I
15.
Googled it.
I was gonna say, on page
I
42.
don't know if it was, it says group family generally refers to a smaller number of individuals or a single family living together in a single unit, like a single family home, while multifamily refers to buildings or complexes with multiple separate living units, each designed for a different family or individual.
it's on page 15.
Okay,
Is
I was
it-
like,
has it
I
got
know
that?
it was somewhere.
Well, it just refers to the group family residential
Oh, that's-
districts and
that's-
single
yeah.
family.
That
that's
just
where it
covers
was.
that broad part of the districts and how those are. But it's talking about sleeping quarters, and group family is traditionally, like the mayor was talking about, you do not have necessarily individual kitchens and bathrooms and things like that. It's more designed with individual rooms, and then there is a kitchen somewhere within the facility. But I apologize, I didn't realize that there wasn't a definition in there.
So if you have to move in with grandma, I guess that'd be considered a group family, right?
I mean, you could go that far, but most of the time we aren't in people's houses and doing that kind of thing. It's kind of like a lot of times it can be like a residential recovery center or something that would be considered more of a group family situation.
Okay, I have a question, and it's are buildings, what about if there's you've got a house, and in the back of the house is a garage, and on the top floor of that garage is an apartment? Is that okay?
I want to say per the tiny homes and accessory structures portion that I was given that you cannot do that, but I'm
Are the
trying to look
ones-
back through it.
Are the ones that already exist, I'm thinking of the one
Yes.
very close to me, are the ones that already exist, they're grandfathered in, right?
Correct.
Okay.
They would be grandfathered in as non-conforming uses or non-conforming structures. And they would be able to continue to exist and repair and maintain the home and the accessory dwelling unit as needed. Yeah, so in that first paragraph that is in Article 21,
That's what page?
it's gonna be page 101. Like, it's talking about accessory buildings that don't have a principal residential building on the same lot. So that's kind of what, it's not allowing it if you don't have a principal structure. It doesn't forbid it if you have a principal structure.
So if you've got a main house.
So if
and
you have a main
garage,
house and you can have a carriage house,
Then you, so it'd be okay then, okay.
or that's the way I'm reading it.
Okay.
But anything before that would not be
Yeah.
would be a grandfather then as of the date of
Yeah.
of this anyway.
And we don't have a provision, like some jurisdictions have sunset provisions where after so many years of a non-conforming use, you have to do away with it, but our ordinance does not do that. So they would be able to continue in perpetuity unless that structure was removed,
Okay,
if it was non-conforming.
that's good.
We'll make the corrections tomorrow for the second reading, the punctuation or whatever. Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 893-25 that updates language, includes provisions for manufactured homes, the historic district, overlay, all that. That's a very short update, but any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I make the motion.
I'll
Second.
second.
Second, all in favor? All right, thank you. All right, so, motion passes. We will have a second reading of this tomorrow night. That's the only thing that's on the agenda, isn't it? We'll do that. Yeah, and she'll do the, and for publishing purposes, we will update like the, so forth. So we'll do that at 7:30 tomorrow night, which is within 24 hours of the second reading, and then that will be done, and then it won't take just a minute to do that. And I appreciate you all doing it. I know it's a little bit late, but we wanted to make sure that she had her meeting and so forth. And then, I guess we're planning a budget meeting on Thursday at 2:00. So, and then we'll have our second one, I assume, on the Monday night or whatever, if you get through the first one and everything, you all agree to that, and there is a second reading available, then we will do that Monday on a regular. So we got back to back 3 special sessions to get this done. And a lot of it's just good housekeeping to get some things back in order and get it under this, so.
And I didn't remember to cover that KRS legislation has to be in effect by July 1. And we found out about it May 19th. So I'm
right.
sorry for the short timeline.
Motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.